I'm Dr. Vijayalakshmi Naik, Assistant Professor, GFGC and PG Center, Dharwad. And I'm back, dear students, with the second and third session of Module 1 from Optional English Paper 1 for BA 5th Sem. We'll be dealing with functions of criticism in the second and third sessions of this module. Literary criticism is the study that is concerned with defining, classifying, analyzing, interpreting, and evaluating works of literature. It judges a work of literature according to various aesthetic systems. Now, any piece of text can be read with a number of different sets of glasses, meaning you are looking at different things within the text. For example, if you are wearing the glasses of feminist theory, then you will look at the text from the point of view of the woman. If you're wearing the psychological glasses or lenses, then you will be looking at the text from the psychological point of view as to why a character has acted in a certain way. Now, the nature and function of criticism, uh, uh, it's very complex because the view of criticism varies from one critic to another critic, and it also varies from one age to another age. Now, the attitude towards criticism is determined by a number of factors. All right. Uh, See, the first factor could be the view of criticism is directly related to critics' own intellectual preoccupation and his philosophy. So, as I've told you, the attitude towards criticism is determined by a number of factors. And the first one is the view of criticism is directly related to the critic's own intellectual preoccupation and his philosophy. That is, usually we form our opinions based on our own experiences, right? That is what happens over here. Now, if the critic has his own experience to depend on, then his own intellectual preoccupation, his philosophy of life, whether it is moral or scientific or artistic, all these things will come into play. And that is why it becomes tricky. Criticism becomes tricky for this very reason. The second attitude towards criticism, the factor that decides this is the idea of criticism varies according to idea of literature. For example, the classical literature will give you a different kind of view from a romantic or a neoclassical literature can give you. Okay. Then the third factor is critical theories are closely connected to the spirit of the age. So as we already know, any literature is defined by its age. The age produces that literature. Similarly, these critical theories are also closely connected to the spirit of the age. For example, if you look at the modern age, we see a lot of development in social and behavioral sciences. And that is why in the modern critical age, uh, the psychological and sociological approaches to literature become very important, and they have seen a huge growth in the modern age. We have to understand all these things, make criticism and the nature and function of criticism are made complex because of all these factors. All right. Now, literary criticism helps readers understand a text in relation to the author, culture, and other texts. It is a method used to interpret any given work of literature. The different schools of literary criticism provide us with lenses which ultimately reveal important aspects of the literary work. That's what I have been telling you in the earlier over here when we spoke about, different glasses. So with different lenses, for example, eco-criticism will talk about, uh, the environmental hazards, uh, through any literary work. How much importance, a author has given to the environment, to nature. So as you keep changing the lenses accordingly, uh, important aspects of those literary works will be revealed to you. Literary studies consists or comprises of three disciplines or branches: history, theory, and criticism. History is the history of literature that you study, the different ages. And in criticism, we will also be studying theories. Now, criticism itself has its own history, and it is important that you understand that. There are different phases to literary criticism. I've given the different phases here in the slide: Hellenic criticism, the Greek criticism, Greco-Roman criticism, the Dark Middle Ages, Renaissance criticism. All these are classified as classicism, and they are called classical criticism. Then you have Romantic criticism, Victorian criticism, and the modern criticism. The importance of literary theory and criticism has increased tremendously after the 1970s, and you see a lot of theories emerged in the modern age. All these theories will be dealt with in the following few modules. Coming to types of criticism, there are different types of criticism, but all these try to enhance the quality of understanding of the reader or the audience. The literary inquiry, you know, uh, the most important three forms of literary criticism in literary inquiry are, I think, legislative criticism, aesthetic criticism, and descriptive criticism. So what is legislative criticism? What does it do? Legislative criticism lays down rules for art of writing based on standard works of literature. They take classical writers as models, and they are the basis. Their work, the classical writers, their works become the basis for this kind of criticism. Legislative criticism it addresses itself to the writers rather than to the reader. It lays down rules to improve creative writing. The second form of criticism, which is very important, is aesthetic criticism. Aesthetic criticism treats literature as an art. Uh, it treats literature as an independent activity of the mind, having an end of its own. It is not concerned with the morality or religion or social constraints. All these have no say in aesthetic criticism, what we call art for art's sake concept. And Walter Pater, Oscar Wilde, and I.A. Richards are advocates of this kind of criticism. The third that I would like to deal here is descriptive criticism, which is the study of individual works and therefore of writers. Their aims, methods, and effects are all important aspects of descriptive criticism. Let's look at some of the important critics. Uh, we have Aristotle, the moral and political critic Plato. Both of these were formalists. Both were interested in classifying literary genres and in identifying conventions, forms, and figures of literary works. They were more interested in the underlying categories than in individual texts. Then you have Horace, Dryden, Wordsworth, the Romantic critic. Then we have modern critics like Matthew Arnold, T.S. Eliot, F.R. Lewis. Um, but for function of criticism, Arnold's essay Function of Criticism at Present Times is a seminal work in the canon of literary criticism. So we'll be looking at it in detail, uh, in a little bit of detail. Okay. Of course, there is T.S. Eliot's Function of Criticism. That also is a seminal essay. But here we'll be dealing with Arnold's essay, Function of Criticism at Present Times. Matthew Arnold is an eminent literary figure who was born in 1822. He is one of the greatest critics of all time. He was a classicist and a pessimist. He was greatly inspired by the Greek masters, Homer, Sophocles, Plato, and Aristotle, and the other Greek masters. The present essay, that is, Function of Criticism at the Present Time, this was for the first time published in 1865 in Arnold's work, Essays in Criticism. It tries to present the ultimate role and function of criticism. Here, Matthew Arnold engages in the relevance and need for applying the right framework of literary criticism. He says that a age should have fresh and new ideas. You know, the general mood of the age is very important, what we call the zeitgeist. That will help creative writers in producing better works. A lot of reading is a very important factor that Arnold stresses on in this essay. And he also believes critics should provide the currents of fresh and new ideas. It is the function of the critics to provide the creative artist with some element in the form of thoughts and ideas so that they can work upon it and produce um, important works. Now, he also believed that a poet has to know all about human life and nature before he can deal with these emotions, in poetry. This knowledge of the world it's absolutely very necessary if the poet's work is to be of any significance at all. It involves a great deal of critical effort. Now, the fresh and new ideas discovered by these men produce a stir and growth in society, and out of this stir, there emerges the creative epochs. What he says is either the critics have to read uh, a lot, they have to be very vociferous and very vast in their reading, or the age should have those current ideas um, in the highest degree so that it can nourish the creative power of the artists. For example, he says that the French Revolution actually had a great ideology and there was a lot of emotional excitement. But it did not produce that kind of great literature because he believes French Revolution was more political than intellectual. So he believes that for great literature to bloom, the age should have fresh and new ideas, or it is the critics' function to provide mm, that that element of uh, fresh current of ideas have to be provided by the critic. Um, Knowledge of the world and human life is absolutely necessary if artists' work is to be of significance. So these are some of the seminal things that he talks about. He also talks about the qualities of a good critic. We'll be looking at that in the next coming slides. But before that, let's move on to the function of criticism. So here on this slide, you can see some of the functions of criticism. Uh, they are in quite simple language and self-explanatory, so I don't think I'll have to give much explanation over here. I'll just read them out. Function of criticism. Criticism aims to give a better understanding of the nature and value of literature in general, not just in particular books, but in general, it gives you a better understanding. Now, particular works of literature and its individual and distinctive qualities are also examined in criticism. Criticism helps to quicken and refine the perceptiveness of the reader, to aid the reader in understanding and interpreting the work of art. Criticism helps to analyze the political, social, and cultural context of a work of art. That work of art is nothing but a novel. It can be a novel, a drama, poem, or uh, in the new media, you have films, the OTT platforms, Netflix and Amazon Prime. You have television serials, advertisements. All these can be called work of art, whether it is a sculpture or a painting. Yeah. Now, legislative criticism aids writers and artists in application of rules and techniques to form and structure of work of art. This I have already told you. What Aristotle does in his Poetics, in his work Poetics, is nothing but legislative criticism, because he lays down rules and techniques as to how you can produce a better creative work. Now, criticism also assesses and fulfills and shapes the needs, wants, and desires of an audience. The, it should be the first task of the artist. All right. The function of literary criticism is to examine the merits and demerits. This I have been repeating again and again in every session of mine, that what criticism does is it finds the pros and cons of a work of art, and it tries to place the work of art in the genre according to its own worth. Now, the chief function of criticism is to enlighten and stimulate. Not just enlighten, but to stimulate. It has to produce something in the reader uh, or the audience. That is a very important function of criticism. A true critic is the one who is equipped for his her task by sound knowledge of his subject. Now, here, as to a good critic, uh, if you need some advice on how to grow plants, who would you go and ask? Obviously, a gardener, right? Because he knows his job, because he has been doing so much of work in that field, he will be well versed. Similarly, uh, if a critic has to uh, be good at his job, then he should have a wide reading and a wide knowledge about literature. Only then he can be a good judge of uh, work of art. A true critic aids an artist by giving guidelines on form and content. Now, according to Scott James, a true critic is an ally of the artist. That is, he becomes a medium between the artist and the reader. Whatever the artist is trying to say, that will be put forward through the critic, the one who reviews. For example, there is a movie, and a good reviewer is someone who is able to uh, reveal to the reader or the audience what the filmmaker is trying to present, what the director of the movie is trying to present. So a true critic is someone who is a friend of the artist. Now, I told you Matthew Arnold, in his essay, Function of Criticism at the Present Time, he gives us some qualities of a good critic. He says that uh, a good critic should be a great scholar and an observer of life with a lot of wide knowledge and learning. Okay. Uh, uh, as I've given you the analogy of a gardener, if you want tips on how to grow healthy plants, you will go to a gardener. Similarly, if a critic, if you want a good review of a movie, then you will go to a critic who has watched a lot of movies and who is able to give you a better judgment because of his wide knowledge about movies, right? So similarly, a good critic is someone who has great scholarship and who is a great observer of life and who has wide knowledge. Now, a good critic should not have personal biases and prejudices and should not belong to any political party. This, I think, goes without saying because if you belong to any political party, you can never be unbiased, right? Okay. Now, Arnold also gives three watchwords for a good critic. He says sincerity, impartiality, and fearlessness are some of the qualities that a good critic must and should have. Okay. Sincerity, that is a kind of honesty in whatever you are doing. Impartiality, without prejudice, and fearlessness, because to uh, to give an impartial judgment, you need to be fearless. You cannot be afraid of any political party, a dominant party, or or anybody. You should be fearless in presenting your views and opinions. So these are the qualities of a good critic according to Matthew Arnold. Now, Matthew Arnold also gives some of the duties of a good critic. Uh, the duty of critic is to refine the taste of the people. He must know and propagate the elements necessary for spiritual perfection, he says. Uh, a good critic should not write in a hurry. He should allow time for his ideas to mature and reshape the world according to his ideals. So he has to be very mature in his thinking, and he has to allow some time to pass uh, after writing so that he can come back and improve upon his ideas. And then whatever his ideals are, not just ideas but his ideals, whatever his ideals are, he has to present that to the world, and uh, with those ideals he has to reshape the world, okay, according to Matthew Arnold. Now, a critic must study and evaluate good literature produced in any country or any period. So, a critic should be conversant with as many literatures in as many languages as possible. In fact, he laid a lot of stress on French and German literature. Okay. So before I end this session, I will just let you ponder on some points. Think about this question. Is literary criticism an art or an exact science? Can it become exact science? Because criticism is, we said, opinions, written opinions is literary criticism, right? So, can our opinions be objective? Because you form your opinions based on your experiences. So, a certain amount of subjectivity is there in everything. Can you become totally objective? Can literary criticism become an exact science, or is it an art? A balance between uh, your personal opinions and trying to find out facts and find what is there in the text and present that to the reader. What is it? Is it an art or an exact science? I want you all to think about it and form your opinions.
So finally, we have come to the end of this session. I have some quite simple multiple choice questions here for you. So please go through them before moving on to the next session. Thank you.